Alrighty, jumping into a game here in the Learning Through Observation series. We've got red with clockwork and maybe an ice troll to add in. We've got blue, dropped a bunch of spiders and a captain, but he's going to need to sell them all for the sea giant because keeping them is just a little too difficult for the early game. It is a shame to sell so much Annie-10, but I believe it's necessary. We've got Ig with turret and egg sac on purple, so no complaints there. And we've got another sea giant with infantry, acolyte, and half-breed on teal. So definitely not bad rolls for West. A little low on the push side though. LOD Necro infantry times stealer on Mr. Mower here. He's certainly happy. We've got Archer on a yellow, as well as LOD and Disciple. But with Disciple and Archer, you actually want to start with the Disciple and then go into the Archer for level 2 and onwards. Got a cannon for green. And we've got engineers re-rolled into Wyvern, Exhack, and Wyvern Ranger and Parasite, pardon. But he's going to keep those engineers, which is a good decision. Cool. As I start to muck around with the sound settings, I think they're actually completely fine as they were, listening to it back now. But, you know, it is what it is. And one thing I just want to make very quickly clear, this is indeed a post-commentary. There was a bunch of noise going on at the time I was actually in this game observing it, so I didn't end up commentating it at the time. But that's okay. We're making this as a bit of a workaround, and it's kind of interesting to do the post-commentating anyway. That being said, this is actually my third take recording it. First one, there was a whole bunch of noise in the middle, sort of interrupted it. The second one, I got the whole way through. I was pretty stoked about it. Realised my microphone was muted the entire time, so definitely feeling like a bit of a lemon, but it is what it is. So you can see this positioning for the infantry right behind the LOD. What that does, particularly on level 10, it'll shuffle the bosses from the middle up to the wall and the LOD, which will give you much better focus and much better clog on the bosses. So you can see Moa is already thinking about level 10, even though it's only level 2. Just a bit of a mark of an experienced player, I suppose. With Pink here, ends up upgrading this engineer. It's completely fine considering you rerolled, but if he hadn't and was playing with engineer still in his role, you wouldn't actually upgrade that one, and you'd build more small engineers. Infantry on teal, a little too far behind. You actually want it a little bit closer if you're going to place it at the back, or right behind it as Mr. Mower showed us. I think with Sea Giant, I would rather start at the infantry further back early on and then build one close, right behind the Sea Giant for the pull, close to the level 10. So you can see Blue decided to only add a novice. It's just too much underbuild. Going 3-0 with Sea Giant for level 2 is very risky. I would say, honestly, unacceptably risky. And he's going to end up getting punished by it and actually leaking level 2 to no send. He had good options in his role as well. 1-0 with a flying machine is excellent. You can 2-0 with a sprite, which works, or do something with the spectres, was also fine. But this novice was definitely quite a mistake. Leaking 10 creeps, so 30 gold's worth of creeps this early on is very punishing. But it is what it is. So we're going to see a 3 send coming in from east here, 3 blood orcs and 1 furb. Not waiting for the scout, which is a bit of a mistake, but then again, you don't really expect free leaks on 2. It really doesn't happen very often, so it is what it is. And I think against that scout, you'd be rather happy to send 3, even knowing that the clockwork will do well. Channeling the feed out of the Ig and the Hydra into the clockwork is going to be relatively good. So you see a third turret being built here by Purple, and he actually ends up selling that for push, which, and we'll see how he goes on 3 after doing that, so just keep an eye on his value. So ideally, if you're Purple, you want to have a bit more of a confirmed plan in mind for each level. So he ends up changing his plan very late, as you can see with 4 seconds to go until the wave. He changes his plan and sells the turret. So I think you just want to be a bit more set in your ways, and just once you've got the plan in mind, just be relatively happy with it. Regardless, as you can see, the clock's going to do excellently. So clockwork is actually bugged in the current version of the map. I believe that's scheduled for change in the next few days, honestly. but it doesn't actually regenerate any health when it uses its ability. However, it also doesn't lose any attack speed. So on levels 2, 3, and 5, where it has efficient increments, so 1 shot on 2 and 3, and 2 shot on 5, it's not that big a deal to lose the regen, but to keep the attack speed for the DPS, right? But on other levels, 4, where its increment isn't quite so efficient, and then going forwards from 6 onwards, you definitely do start to miss the regen. So I would say it is a significantly weaker unit, but it's still very, very usable for sure. You just got to be aware. You've got to be aware of that and play a little safer, which is generally not my preference with a unit like Clock that doesn't scale into mid-game very well at all. So Blue, he's currently 3 gold off getting the Hydra for 5 because he's only got 3 income, but as long as he does something about that, he's got no problems. Looks like Purple's going for the second Ig 5. When I was actually in this game, because as I said, this is a post commentary. When I was actually in this game, I didn't notice him sell the turret for 3 because it was in the last few seconds. So I thought he must have done something really, really strange, like misclick sell it here and then rebuild it. Regardless, Ig with 2 turrets will hold 4 without a problem, so he didn't actually need to add anything here. So he's a little bit overbuilt, I would say, unnecessarily with 2 Hydras in the team, but it's okay. You can see Green hasn't loaded one of those cannons, but Cannon is very, very good on 4, so he'll hold regardless. You can see our Pink here, Solal, with the Wyvern in front. Good positioning. You do need it to tank some, or you'll just leak very, very hard on level 4. And generally, you'd see someone with that role go into a Wind Rider for level 5, if they didn't plan to just fully suicide. But we'll see if he ends up doing that or not. See Moa with his Necro setting up the anti-10 nice and early, which is basically what you want to see. And yeah, as I said, this cannon, even unloaded, it's rather tanky on level 4. And with the AoE shots from the first cannon hitting most of the creeps, it gets the one-shots in. Doesn't need to build anything here. Cannon very, very, very good on 5. With 2 PS ammunition cannons, you'll easily hold. Yeah, I've even seen it hold a Blood Orc. With 480 value, which is rather impressive. Anyway, as you can see, doesn't go for the Wind Rider, opts for the Flying Machine instead. Personally, I would put that Flying Machine at the back because it is far more of a DPS unit on level 5 compared to the Engineers, which obviously don't have any splash. But we'll see how it goes for him. Yellow definitely overbuilding. You don't need that second Elite Archer. But maybe he's expecting a bit of a send, not too sure. I don't think it's unreasonable to overbuild, but personally I would definitely push it a little bit more with that roll. So we see the 4 clocks here for red. Not a big fan of 4 clocks because it leaves you very, very weak on 6 or forces you to overbuild rather hard. Personally, if I was him, I would have dropped the ice roll and then gone for a reroll and just seeing what I ended up with. Because when you take the feed like that on level 3, you obviously got quite a lot of extra gold. You do want to balance that into an efficient sort of lane, right? So you get that extra little boost, which means you should immediately be looking or thinking about how can I be strong this game, right? And I would say 4 clocks in general is not a way to be strong. It's just very, very weak on 6, doesn't scale into the mid game. And they just sort of feel like dead value. Honestly, after 9, I think they sort of feel like dead value. But anyway, we'll see how he makes it work. He's certainly pushed reasonably well, at least not terribly. So it's it's not like all is lost or anything. So you can see Green adding the cannon behind, the small cannon, similar to Archer and Nightsaber. You'll actually want that in front to tank, seeing as the upgraded cannons do much, much more damage. Yellow just staying here. Moa aiming for the Hades on level 7. Bit of a semi-hold. Should clear reasonably well. Even versus a reasonable send. See the Hydra. 4 clock solo will obviously lag quite a bit. And the Hydra for blue as well. So West is playing with 3 semi-holders at the moment, which is actually rather risky. If East got Immolation and full send, or simply decided to just go like, right, sweet, we're full sending, If those 3 semi-holders don't go mid, or if some of them don't go mid, then none of them really have any wood to upgrade the king, right? So if those lanes break, then it's going to be an extremely weak king and it does not take many units to just blow 3-4 heals, or even just outright kill a king with very low upgrades. So you got to be careful when you're just playing with multiple semi-holders, that you don't leave yourself overly weak to a 7 send. Sometimes you don't feel like you have much of a choice, and sometimes you don't have much of a choice. But it's always worth thinking about whether it might be better for one of these players to push more, and perhaps one of them to overbuild a bit more and make sure they actually can be mid to ascend. Because they haven't seen very much information from East team at the moment. They haven't actually leaked for them, so they don't really know what they have units wise. They don't know what they have king upgrades wise. Well, they do now, in fairness, because you can see East has done HP a little bit early to get the income in. So they can now feel relatively safe, and if they have any spare gold, they don't need to add. They get to push a little bit extra. But yeah, semi-holders is always a little bit careful. This Sea Giant, I actually like to place it off the wall there, and leave an empty spot on the wall, which can be really nice for an infantry to pull bosses to the wall on 10, or something like an aura or any melee unit you might want to mix for 15. That tends to be quite a good spot for it. Anyway, we're going to watch Mara because he's the only person that received Ascend that's overbuilding at all. So rather good aggro there. You can see actually the Fire Archer and the infantry take some damage but survive. So definitely getting on the lucky side. Even so, Hades is not the greatest on level 7, but he manages to kill his hermits and clear the majority of his lane, so I would say that's reasonably successful for 5-1. If I was him, I would be relatively happy. So you can see 3 people on West holding, so they don't have any problems. And we're watching the king control from East. We've got Shockwave there, which is, in general, I think it's my favourite spell. It's just decent every level, besides 10, I suppose. Anyway, we can see the hermits not quite getting 2-hit. Some of them will, some of them won't. It's actually a chance to 2-hit. But because he has the range spell Shockwave, he knows that even if he doesn't finish off the hermits with the 2 attacks, he knows he can just kill them with the second Shockwave. So he just hits each one twice, doesn't bother actually finishing the ones that don't die. So that's just some good control on his part. So you can see no holders versus a straight 7 send, or regen 7 send, I suppose. And East ends up only losing 1 heal. So they should be rather happy about that for sure. Losing 1 heal is not that big a deal, considering that was the opponent's full send and they were all overbuilt. So everyone on West now has to push to have any hope of staying relevant in the game, basically. Cool, so I believe I take a very quick alt tab here, but I'll be moving the camera back around very, very shortly. There we go. So checking in on blue, he's got a Sea Giant with a Spectre. It's a reasonable build. We've got the Clockworks, we've got Hydra Zeus with a Sea Giant as well. And then we've got the 3 Iggs with turrets on purple. You can see blue deciding to add a flying machine here. It's a good decision for sure, because he would actually legate focus dependent, but I suspect reasonably hard without it. The flying machine is quite a good unit for level 8, so it was definitely a smart idea to build it in his line for this level. So good decision. It's a bit of a shame in some ways, because I think blue has actually played this game rather well overall. Like, his build is good. He hasn't really done anything wrong, except he just played a bit too risky, a bit too greedy on level 2. And that really ended up with him getting punished on level 2 and then level 3 to this end. So quite unfortunate for him there. It's just one of those things. This is just what happens. So we've got Teal clearing reasonably easily, with the Zeus getting buffed to do his spell more often and overall slightly more DPS, it definitely feels a lot better to have a Zeus just on levels like 5 and 8. So I'm rather happy with that change. It went from a unit that I thought felt relatively weak on all levels outside of level 10 to a unit that I think is now rather reasonable. Certainly not overpowered or particularly strong, but it just feels a little bit better whenever you use it. It doesn't feel like quite such a dead value unit going into the mid game or on levels such as level 8. Awesome. So one thing you can actually take a quick note of is the regeneration on Beast Legion. So we see it at the moment 6640 to 6663, which means 23 health every single tick. That means 4 regen, okay? Because the base number is 3 regen, and then it's plus 5 for every single king upgrade regeneration, right? So if you see 23 regen a tick, it means 4 upgrades. So it goes from 3 to 8 to 13 to 18, 23, 28, etc., right? That can be very, very helpful just to know how much regen your opponent has, or if their king is low in the mid game and they decide to upgrade the king and say try and skip maybe 15, for example, they do king instead. If they do some greedy regen, try and sneak it past you, then if you're paying attention to that, if you know how much regen they have, then you can adjust your plan accordingly, which is always a good thing. Anyway, we see Moa getting the Ghost here. I would argue that Ghost is the single best unit in this game. Just does so much overall damage with the Heartstopper aura. Very, very good. Definitely whenever you sort of see a Necromancer, you're already thinking about when and where you're going to put your Ghost. I'd very, very rarely skip over it because it is just that strong. So you see for green actually leaking a little bit. So I didn't talk about this when I sort of panned over it, but he actually made a Wyvern instead of upgrading the Tree of Travel for level 9. I certainly would have upgraded the tree. Slow Aura. Speaking of Ghost being the best thing in the game, I would consider Slow Aura to be the second best thing in the game. It is just so valuable on every single melee level with any units. Very, very strong. And it's also very, very good on 10. Tree of Travel has a longer range aura than the Magnetor. It's a little weaker but longer range, so it actually really clogs the bosses up quite a lot, and it provides far more tanking value than you might think just looking at the stats compared to the gold cost. Anyway, both teams are sending level 10. There's a big full send from east with Pudges, and just a smaller send from west, most likely just till income. Having a look at their incomes now, I do suspect their send was till income only. You can see Moa is very, very well set up, the anti-10. He'll drag the bosses to the wall with the infantry, and chances are he'll only lose the summons and be able to kill everything else, be able to get all of his other units going to mid, which is exactly what you want. Anyway, I decided that Moa is basically guaranteed mid, so I believe I go over and check out how West does on level 10 in a second. There we go. So we've got the double Hydra from Teal. If you noticed, he didn't actually build anything to pull the bosses, as seen by Mr. Moa. So he ends up having a bit of a split focus here with bosses walking around the side. You definitely don't want these bosses walking around the side off the wall. You want them all clogged to the wall as much as possible. Bit unfortunate for Blue, but he didn't have all that much all that much damage in his lane. Hydra is quite a good tank on 10, but it's not so effective when you're trying to use it for tanking and for doing all the damage, so I'm not surprised to see him like quite hard there. Relatively low value as well, considering he had quite a difficult early game. As you can see, Moa ends up with, I believe that's almost everything mid. Suddenly the 2 infantries, the Hades, the Ghost, and at least one of the Necrolytes, so definitely very happy about that. No, both of the Necrolytes even. So as you can see, he's killed 3 bosses in his lane, so now he's killed 4. And 5 gets a resummon, and 6, and 7, and 8 bloody bosses on level 10. So that's just a ridiculous amount of feed at that point, so I'm sure he's very, very happy. But then again, he was clearly thinking about level 10 as early as level 2, just judging from his build. So it's really, really good to see that he got rewarded actually for planning ahead, right? Because that's what you want in any sort of competitive game. You want to be rewarded for skill expression, right? You want to be able to show like I'm skilled, and the game will reward you if you make good plays, if you make good decisions. You want to be rewarded, okay? And I think we're rather lucky that Brad and Kappa have done such a good job on this map that I reckon you can really, really see that when you play, which is awesome, honestly. It's always a bit dull to have a game where it's just like, it feels a bit bland, right? If the game feels a bit bland, it feels no matter what you do, the game is the same. But that's certainly not this game. So that's really, really nice. That's why I like it so much, and why I'm sure many of you guys like it so much. Anyways, saving a bit of gold on a lot of these West players, which I suppose is understandable. Relatively unlikely they win the arena. But as if you just compare on the scoreboard here, the values between the two teams, the values are overall a bit higher for East, largely because of Orange here getting so much feed on level 10. But also the incomes are overall higher, and they have more lumber in their banks, right? And the bank is, we call it the bank, it's literally just how much lumber you have, like at this point, right? So at the moment, Moa has 400 lumber in the bank. Chances are that teal and blue, and probably purple as well, have only like 200, for example, right? And then some of Moa's teammates who had more push than him on level 10 would have far, far larger banks, maybe up to 1,000 sort of thing, okay? So having that bank is very, very important. It gives you more pressure for sending mid-game, and it lets you send potentially earlier than your opponents, or with less leaks or faster leaks than your opponents would be able to. So that's always a good thing. And you can see Moa's actually decided to go 7-6 here. So if this game were a little bit closer in terms of the heals between the two teams, I believe East has 2 more heals than West, or if they were closer in terms of how much lumber they had, I think you'd actually see him stay 7-4 and look to hold the enemy's send, okay? But because they're so far ahead in terms of value, heals, and the amount of lumber they have, he's very happy to just push 7-6, be confident that he'll be able to hold whatever small send is coming from West, even though he's pushed to 7-6, and then just send a lot more for his team. So I think it's not the correct decision every game. When you get very, very fed on 10, it's not, oh yeah, I'm going to push 7-6 because I got lots of feed, right? But I think this game it was indeed the correct decision. It's certainly interesting to analyse these sorts of decisions, right? Because sometimes you'll see feed on 10 means stay 7-4 and try and hold the enemy send. Sometimes feed on 10 means use that feed, use that extra gold to basically transform it, I suppose, into extra lumber. So it just depends. It's very, very much game dependent. I believe I've just taken a quick alt tab here and we'll sort of get moving again. So you can see on the mini-map there, teal leaking quite a bit, red leaking quite a bit. But both of the Hydras managed to hold at least. Hydra is relatively good on 11, just because it's very, very tanky. It's a bit of a funny scene in mid here. We've actually got a bit of an army of small Hydras versus these creeps. But there are small Hydras and Hydras in general, not a whole lot of damage against the fortified armor on 11, so they'll actually rather struggle to clear all of this. Just get to watch them go for a second. And because of the way this leak is developed, right, and the mid that West team had, as in all these small Hydras, the units that have gone mid is the mid. So this level 11 actually ends up being very, very long, okay, and taking a lot of time. When a level is slow like this, it takes a lot of time. That means there's obviously more time where the wisps are ticking and you're getting lumber. So if there's a slow level like that, you can see that Moa's gone from 800 wood to 1300 wood. So a slow level like that means that, honestly, if, say, there was no leak on level 12, they'd still be able to send nice and early. He's just asking what Blue had for level 2 to free leak. I figured I'd just tell him because, to be completely honest, I wasn't 100% sure that Novice and Sea Giant would leak. I was fairly sure it would leak, but I actually wasn't sure until I saw it leak. So we're all sort of learning off other people's mistakes, right? And while it certainly was a mistake, it doesn't deserve to be sort of hung by the neck for it, because he's learned from it. I'm sure we're not going to see the same again, and I've learned from it because now I know for certain Hydra plus Novice leaks on 2, or Sea Giant rather plus Novice. Regardless, we can see purple going for Tox, blue and teal going for Hydra, and red going for Trident. So it definitely looks more like they're thinking a 15 send is incoming from east, and we'll just see if they end up being correct or not. Can be a little bit hard to predict from time to time whether the send's like 15 or 14, perhaps later. Depends a lot on the leak speed, but you know, it's very difficult to be 100% confident. That's for certain. So you can see there's actually not going to be a leak on level 12. But as I already sort of mentioned, level 11 being so slow, honestly evens this out quite a bit. If you had fast leaks, relatively fast leaks on level 11 and level 12, that would honestly amount to a very similar amount of time as that very slow level 11. Regardless, Hydra helicopter on blue, Trident teal, red pardon, Hydra's third Zeus, and just Tox for purple. Moa's going for another Lod there. I think it's a pretty decent decision. Lod's just a really strong catch-all unit. Good on every wave besides, I think, 12 it's a little below average. But yeah, if you're not sure when your enemy's sending and you have Lod, it's never a bad decision, because it's just relatively strong on every wave. Just has a lot of effective HP considering all the summons for the cost. Not a whole lot of DPS, so you definitely want some damage mixed in with it. You don't want to just go solo Lord, as in just massing Hades without any actual damage behind it. That generally won't do all that well. But it can work if you have enough value for sure. Anyway, having a look on the minimap, it's actually a level 14 send from east, but there were no leaks on level 12 or level 13, okay? It was only a very slow level 11. So I'm quite sure that West here is not expecting this send, okay? Simply because sending 14 without leaks on 12 and 13 is definitely unusual, okay? So I think in the game I haven't actually noticed that there was a send here yet. But as we can see, TL ends up saving a lot of gold. He would have, I believe he saves approximately 500 gold here, simply because without those leaks, he just didn't see the send coming at all. But we'll see. In general, with strong anti-14 units, you're looking at about 2,900 to 3,000 value to actually hold. With, I'm just sort of mucking around with Moa here, with not anti-14 or with weaker units versus 14, for example, like Hydras, you're probably needing more like 3,200 value to actually start looking at a hold. So looking at West's values, they're not very close to those numbers. So we'll jump over to West Legion in just a couple of seconds. And we'll see that everyone ends up leaking. Blue ends up doing the best with his Hydra. Hydra is reasonably effective as a tank on 14 if you have some damage behind it. So, and this was a rather small send, but it ended up working. As you can see, quite a lot of gold saved. Probably about 400, not 500, but regardless. Yeah, gold saved on teal was painful for them. But honestly, I don't think it really would have made the difference. I think even if he was a small mid here, I think they were just dead anyway. Regardless, definitely an interesting game. Some sort of things to pick up in terms of a couple of build tips, a couple of sort of strategy things you can think about. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed it, learned a little bit. Cheers very much for watching, and just let me know what you think of the series in general, because I haven't seen it anywhere else. Yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.